the holiday season is a time for merrymaking, family togetherness. It's a season of love, but some people don't quite get it, and some people would rather take advantage. And so how do you protect yourself from that? How do you protect yourself from fraud? Not too long ago, we had an expert come here to give us tips on how to do that. Chuck, when we talk about fraud, is it more prevalent during the holiday season, or should we be more careful around this time?
Well, it is a bit more prevalent during the holiday season. If people are in the giving mood, and one of the things that fraudsters typically do is find opportunities. Fraudsters are opportunists, and so during the holidays, there's just a bit more opportunity.
And let us talk about that. What are the most common types of fraud that Americans are exposed to?
Well, right now, probably one of the big ones relates to disaster relief.
Okay.
Anytime there's been a major storm, Katrina, of course, Sandy in the Northeast, the fraudsters come out, and it's playing upon the hearts of people to be able to want to give, to be able to want to do something kind, and fraudsters are incredibly adept at being able to say, well, give to this disaster relief program when in fact there is no disaster relief taking place in that program.
Okay, what do we do then to safeguard ourselves, safeguard our identity?
Well, in many cases, the main thing is to just be vigilant and to think through the process. It becomes real easy to get caught up in the emotion, and most of the time when you're caught up in the emotion of a fraudster, that's when you're most vulnerable. So think through what you're doing. If I'm going to give, for example, perhaps I'll give through the American Red Cross, but I'm not going to give from someone who has contacted me via Facebook and said, oh, but you need to give to our small community, because I don't really know that it will go there.
Those organizations that have integrity and credibility, those are the ones, and track record as well, those are the ones that you
Absolutely.
help. What about investing? You know, when people talk about spending during the holiday, they also talk about investing, saving money. How do we protect ourselves from investment fraud? Well,
investment fraud tends to have three parts to it, and I call it falling into the pit.
Okay.
There is a promise that's made. There is an illusion that takes place, and typically there's trust. And in most cases, whether it's Bernie Madoff or whether it happens to be the person at the church, the fact is that an investment fraud in most cases is promising you a return better than what other people can get, so they're playing on ego.
Okay.
They create some form of an illusion, fake materials, fake identifications, fake statements, and more times than not, that fraud is perpetrated by people close to you.
Oh, okay. What about, so what do we do now if you are suspicious of an offer? How do you protect yourselves?
Well, sometimes, again, it's thinking through the process. Now, I know this is a harsh thing for people to hear, but generally speaking, if you're going to invest your funds, invest with someone that is credible and is arm's length.
Well, how do you do that? If, say, for example, it's somebody close to you, maybe a cousin or an aunt, an uncle, and that's very common in the Filipino community. We're very close to our relatives, and sometimes we want to help, and plus also because they themselves say that they benefited from, you know, whatever type of investment, then it's like a testimonial from them.
Absolutely it is. And the unfortunate part to that is I tend to avoid that.
Why is that?
Well, the hard part becomes this. Most every major fraud that you've heard of tends to have been perpetrated by people who are close to each other and trust each other. So if I'm going to invest my money, I want to invest it with someone where I have an arm's length transaction. I'm not going to invest with relatives. I'm not going to invest with friends. Not that they're bad people, but why would I want to put myself or them at risk for something that could be avoided if all I did was use common sense and invest in an arm's length way?
And when you're saying thinking things through, how much time do you give yourself to think? And maybe should we also put there, investigate, like try to look up the company that you're investing with? Absolutely.
Look up the company, check out what's being perpetrated. For example, real estate frauds. They said, well, we're buying this property. Well, easy enough to go to the county and look at online records and find out, do they actually own it? Just simple things that people oftentimes don't do are the things that protect those from becoming victims.
Perhaps also taking the time to go visit their office and see that, is this office legitimate? Is this something that, maybe tomorrow will still be here?
Sure.
Right?
Due diligence. Just making sure that what you're doing makes sense.
Okay, so now we all make mistakes, some very more costly mistakes than others. So if for those people who have found themselves to be victims of fraud, what do they do? What steps should they take?
Well, there's consumerfraudreporting.org, which is a comprehensive website that a person can go to if they feel like there's a possibility that a fraud's being perpetrated or they might be a victim. But beyond that, if sure enough you have been victimized, one of the first things to do is find a competent attorney or tax accountant that can help go in and take advantage of some of the provisions of the tax code. Because if you have been victimized, certainly there are ways that at least you can receive some tax benefit from that.
Okay, but what are the chances of you recouping whatever it was that was taken?
Generally, not too good.
Okay, and that's why we have to be careful.
Absolutely.
Where can we get more information about, being careful and just, knowing how to protect ourselves?
Well, consumerfraudreporting.org is a great website to go to. And because I do this around the country, if people would like to visit my website, that's chuckgallagher.com. And I receive all kinds of emails that come in on a regular basis asking about certain types of frauds and how to avoid them.
And because you're exposed to all these and you give tips and pieces of advice, what would be the one advice that, they can forget about everything, but there's one advice that you think they need to adhere to, keep in mind, and just, keep to heart?
Well, the easiest and quickest fraud that's taking place is internet fraud. And anytime someone, in fact, I got one just literally an hour ago telling me that I had inherited some amount of money.
Yeah.
If it sounds too good to be true, just delete it and move on, because too many people are preying too many victims through the internet.
All right. Well, thank you so much. More power to you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
This is also the season for a lot of get-togethers. Now, how do you turn those Christmas parties or holiday parties into networking opportunities? We have some tips when we return on the show. Don't go away.